in verses 30 through 32, 3 movements of grace and love are revealed with Jesus, the mourners, and Mary. And we've got something to learn from all of them. So we're going to look at Jesus, the mourners, and then Mary, and learn from their 3 examples about presence. So starting in verse 30. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still at the place where Martha met him. In other words, Jesus stayed where he was. He interacted with Martha. Martha goes away and he stays. Thinking about this, I thought how we don't need Jesus to move to feel his power. Sometimes his stillness is where healing begins. My friends, we don't do well with silence. We got to fill the silence with noise. And we also don't do well with stillness, remaining, being calm and being quiet. We would much rather be noisy, be active, and rush ahead. Jesus did not rush ahead. He stayed right where Martha had met him, still available, still present, and still patient. My friends, we can learn from that example by being available, being present, and being patient. Jesus wasn't abandoning his grieving friends. The delay was not distant. The delay was intentional. Think of a parent who kneels down at a child, at eye level, in order to comfort them, rather than shouting comfort from across the room. The Old Testament, written in Hebrew is very much an Oriental language, very much an Asian language. It's very pictorial, so that every letter is a picture, every word is a picture. It's more concrete than English is. And the image, the picture for the Hebrew Old Testament word for compassion is so telling. It's so beautiful. The word picture for compassion, embedded in the language of Hebrew, is a mother holding a child. Mom's hug is the picture of compassion. That's awesome. And here we have Jesus showing compassion to the grieving by presence. Mom hugging a child. That's Jesus, my friends. And sometimes that's what we need. We don't need Jesus to move mountains. We don't need Jesus to raise the dead. We need Jesus to give us a hug. A hug that lasts more than 3 seconds. A hug that lasts more than 8 seconds. We need Jesus to just hold us. Close, near, focused in on us for as long as it takes. Beautiful. That's Jesus. Jesus is close. Jesus is near. Jesus is focused. He's not always moving. Sometimes he remains still. He stays. My friends, we have to remember that God's presence is powerful. And take that as a personal lesson for our life. If God's presence is powerful, Him being here, but Him being still is powerful. Can't we learn from that? Maybe our presence is what's important. Maybe all we got to do is be here and be still. I got to chew on that a lot. I got to think about Jesus stayed, so let's follow Jesus' perfect example, my friends. Let us stay. Let us stay faithful. Let us stay present in this moment, in this place, grounded in His compassion. Maybe we need to be the mother giving the wounded child a hug. There may be somebody in our lives that desperately needs a hug that lasts longer. I know not everybody is a hugger. And you know, I'm a suppressed hugger. I would hug everybody, everywhere, every time, but I get it. That's socially unacceptable. There are people who don't like hugs. There are people who don't want hugs. I respect that. So I reserve my hugs. And in the process, I forget. I've got such a bad rememberer. I forget who likes hugs and who doesn't. And so it's like, is he a hugger or not? And so it gets awkward. It's like, are you a hugger or not? And I got to have a conversation with a new widower. His wife had died 1.5 years ago. And we're talking, and he's sharing his pain. And he said, I haven't been hugged since she died. And that crushed me. You've gone 1.5 years without a hug. Brother, you're my hug buddy. It doesn't matter where. If I see you in a men's room, I'm giving you a hug. All right, men, we know that. If you haven't seen your father in 25 years and you stumble upon him in a men's room, you don't talk to him, right? There's the head nod. And you talk out in the hallway. To go 1.5 years without having been hugged, we need to be there for those people. We need to be like Jesus and stay present and available, even when the people around us are confused and hurting. You might need a hug. There's somebody around who will give you a hug. There might be somebody around you who needs a hug. Let's you and me be people of compassion. When thinking about this idea, it took me all over the place, my friends. It took me applying this to spiritual warfare, to relationships in general. It took me to family, spouses, marriage. So let me just chop it down for us. Think about spiritual warfare and how Jesus stayed. The enemy distracts. The enemy delays. The enemy wants you to move on to greener pastures, to happier places, removing you and your presence, and therefore lessening your impact. There are times when you're walking with the Spirit and the Spirit says go, and when He does, you need to go. Sir, yes, sir. But oftentimes we're looking for a reason to go when the Spirit is saying stay. Let's not fall for the snare of the enemy, promising greener pastures, and us ignoring the fact that that's because it's fertilized more. How about in your walk? Just your walk with Jesus, your day-to-day relationship with Jesus. We need to remember that Jesus is not far. Even when He seems delayed, He stays. We can trust His presence, that He is with us, dwelling in us. He's the vine. We are the branch grafted into Him. And His presence is constant. His presence is strong, and he doesn't disconnect from us. In that way, he's like good Wi-Fi. Good Wi-Fi is strong. Good Wi-Fi is present. And good Wi-Fi does not disconnect. That's Jesus when we're walking with him. We need to trust his presence. Not just where he's taken us. Sometimes we just need to sit still and bask in his presence, my friends. When's the last time you had one of those quiet moments of just sitting still with your Savior, enjoying the moment together? Remaining is easy to apply to relationships. Sometimes the best gift you can give is your steady presence, where somebody can rely on you being there, especially in close relationships, close connections, best friends, husband and wife, parents and children, your siblings. Staying is often an act of godliness. Staying, remaining available emotionally. Staying, remaining available spiritually. Staying and remaining available physically. We need people in our lives that are a constant presence. And my friends, we need to be those people to others. It seems like we're getting separated from people far too easily. We've got a mobile culture. I mean, back in the day, you were born and lived and died in the same town, and now we PCS, we move for jobs, we travel the country and the world. That makes it even more important that we find people we can be close to. We can be present emotionally, spiritually, and physically as an act of godliness so that Jesus can use us in those relationships. And then, when it comes to people jumping ship, I see that most in marriages. It's heartbreaking. In husband and wife, we need to stay when it's easier to withdraw. We need to stay when words run out. We need to stay at our spouse's side like Jesus did for Mary and Martha. We need to stay in our marriage faithful, available, and present through the good times and through the bad. This too shall pass, my friends. Too many people want a quick exit. Jump out of the plane and pull the parachute, thinking that the next relationship, the next marriage will be better, not realizing we bring that baggage with us. Stay available, my friends, like Jesus. Stay faithful like Jesus. And stay present like Jesus, my friends. Verse 30. Okay, moving on to verse 31, where the Jews followed Mary. Remember verse 31? When the Jews who were with her in the house and were consoling her, when they saw that Mary had gotten up quickly and left, because they didn't hear Martha's words to her, the Jews followed her, thinking that she was going to the tomb to weep there. The Jews are there as mourners. They are there to express compassion on Mary and Martha for their loss, to weep with them, to provide for them. I'm sure there was a kitchen loaded with casseroles, which for some reason is what we do. I don't know if they had casseroles back then. Probably not. The mourners showed compassion and love by following Mary in her grief and pain. They left the food, they left the comfort of the home to follow her in her pain. Love doesn't always lead. Sometimes love and compassion follows a person into their darkness, into the graveyard of sorrow, and into someone else's pain. And that's what these mourners were doing. It's not only presence is powerful, this is the ministry of presence. This is the service of presence. The mourners did not try to fix Mary's pain. They simply stayed with her and followed her into it. They walked with her in her grief, not ahead of it. They realized that just their presence was comfort. You know, have you ever tried to comfort somebody in pain and made it worse? Your heart was in a good place. You were trying to use the right words, and before you know it, a Kleenex box got thrown at you, right? That's Job's friends, right? The book of Job, right? Job's friends got it right for 7 days, where they sat with Job in silence. Ministry of presence. The moment they tried to explain Job's situation, they made it worse. All things work together for good. Oh, don't throw nothing at me. This too shall pass. Well, it was God's will. Hit me with a truck, right? The moment they tried to explain the pain, they made it worse. Job's friends, almost everything Job's friends said were wrong. My friends, comfort is often more about being than saying. We don't go into a person's darkness and grief and pain because we don't know what to say. Don't say anything. You don't have to say anything. Deliver the casserole, give the hug. Take out the garbage, wash the dishes. You don't have to say nothing. Your mere presence is a ministry and a service. Do the 7 days of Job's friends and not all the yakking speeches afterwards. Because you being there is what matters. You know, when you've been in a place of sorrow and grief and pain, you remember the people who were there for you, not the words that were spoken to you. You remember the people that gave you a hug, that cried with you, that checked in on you 2 weeks later. Oh, so chewing on this, my friends. A ministry of presence, silence and stillness, following people into grief. That has an application to life all over the place. I mean, we could apply that everywhere and to everything. I mostly focused in on the spiritual warfare aspect of it. And again, our connection to people, our friends, and then our spouses. Ministry of presence The mourners followed. So let us walk with others, even into places of pain. Be available for them to be vulnerable, where we're not being judgy. It's okay. You can cry. You can cry on my shoulders. You can curse and scream and blame God all you want. You can curse and scream and blame me all you want. I'm here to take it. Be like the mourners. And let's follow each other into difficult places. Because it's the person walking away that needs us the most. So let's break it down. In spiritual warfare, the enemy, he knows people so well, he knows us so well, he knows me so well. The enemy uses our fear of saying the wrong thing or being in the wrong place, our fear of making it worse or of being rejected, to keep us away and to keep us disengaged. And so it's safer for us to disconnect. And when we disconnect, the enemy wins. The enemy wins. Because we're in this together, my friends. You're not in life alone. And you're not in your faith with Jesus Christ alone. We're walking in it together. And so let me ask, who are you walking with right now? Who do you need to follow into their pain, into their grief, into their darkness? Not to fix it, but just to feel it with them so that they know they've been heard, so that they know they've been seen, so that they have a shoulder to lean on. That made me think about husbands and wives, marriages. Whew. Especially grief and sorrow and pain in marriage. Because pain doesn't isolate in marriage when spouses walk through it together. Pain, grief, sorrow makes the person suffering withdraw. Because we don't have the energy to deal with anything else. All I can handle is my current suffering. I can't handle anything else. But when the spouse comes along in that and doesn't add to the, but helps, that's a beautiful thing. When the spouse walks with that person in sorrow, even when the path leads to hard places. I have seen beautiful examples of that are just awe-inspiring, and I have seen ugly examples of that. I've seen diagnosis where the wife got diagnosed with MS and the husband left her in the family. I have seen the wife get diagnosed with MS and the husband stay. Change careers so that he could be more available to take care of her. I have seen the president of a university whose wife got diagnosed with dementia retire at the peak of his career and influence in order to stay home and take care of her until she died. Beautiful. Love. Compassion. Like the beauty, love, and compassion we expect from God. It's a beautiful thing when your spouse rises up suddenly to follow you with care and not suspicion. Where husband and wives are together through the bad times, They're there for each other emotionally, physically, and spiritually. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I wish it was 100% of the examples of life, because it should be. We need to be there for one another, especially in matrimony. How about friends? Even with friends, being there counts. You know, a text, a presence, even a shared silence. These matter more than perfect words. Showing your love to somebody you're connected with when they're suffering. I mean, if you don't know what to say, text an emoji, which I can say but not spell, because there's an awful lot of weird vowels in that. I think it's like an EM something, 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 but it's those little pictures. I mean, picture a weepy face, you know, followed with the hug emoji. I don't know if there's a hug emoji, but there should be one. A teddy bear. Just do not send the emoji that is the swirl of chocolate ice cream, because apparently that means something else. You don't have to be brilliant. Just a little reach out. I know what you're going through. That's it. I'm here for you. Text that. Show up with more than casseroles, but maybe their favorite dessert. Or a free guitar, whatever way. Just I'm laying that out, you know. You don't have to say the right things. You don't have to say anything. When you know your friend is suffering, whether they're a hugger or not, go in there and give them a hug. Because especially if they're not a hugger, they'll remember the fact that, you know, their strange friend got all weird on them. And then they'll check their wallet to make sure you didn't pickpocket them. That's good. That's all right. These things matter. Presence matters. You got to be there to share the experience. And thankfully, technology has made it available to where we can be there thousands of miles away even. All right, 31. Last verse, 32. Mary, Mary, Mary. She saw Jesus, she fell at Jesus' feet, and she spoke to Jesus. Let's be more like Mary. Verse 32 says, so when Mary came to the place where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You can hear the pain. Grief, my friends, is not the opposite of faith. Pain and suffering does not mean that God does not love you. Sometimes falling at Jesus' feet in sorrow, in pain, overwhelmed by the valley of the shadow of death, is the highest form of faith. Because you're taking your burden to your Savior who can deliver you or walk with you through that. Mary's reaction to Jesus is a mix of everything. I mean, it's such a beautiful, real human moment. I mean, you can just stand in her sandals and reenact it. I mean, there's worship, there's honesty, there's words, Mary's act is a beautiful mixture of worship and honesty. She falls at Jesus' feet. What is that? Well, that's signifying humility and reverence. You fall at somebody's feet as an act of worship. It also speaks about how raw her grief and her confession was. She had to fall at his feet before she could find the words. Worship does not deny pain. It brings it into God's presence. And we fall for the trap that we have to be in the right mindset, the right mood, have the right emotions in order to worship God. My friends, the opposite of that is true. When you worship God, you get the right headspace. You get the right emotions. You get the right perspective because you have encountered the holy creator God who loved you first. Don't let the enemy win by saying you got to fix it before you worship. Be like Mary, who goes to Jesus and worships in her pain. And she does so silently. Just take it to him, and he will love on you and walk with you through it. David. King David's a pretty good example of this, who's described as a man with God's own heart. He often poured out his pain in the Psalms. An awful lot of the Psalms are written by him, and there's an awful lot of raw emotions in there. Grief, pain, sorrow, doubt, frustration, confusion. Just as one small example, Psalm 13, verse 1. How long, O Lord? I can totally identify with that. Because God's patience is so much longer than mine. Long suffering. John's not a favor of long suffering. How long, O Lord? Is not an expression of unbelief. It's an honest cry of faith, trust that he is in charge, he is in control, he is good, and he has got this. Children don't mind when they go to mom and dad and ask, how long? Are we there yet? But we take it. We're just happy they're talking to us. It's all right. This verse, life application. Again, the same idea of this presence of God. How can we apply the presence of God in the midst of pain to our lives? Well, it definitely has spiritual warfare aspects, relationships, and marriage. This life application where Mary fell and spoke. Let you and I bring our honesty and our humility to Jesus. Let's be like Mary. Let's fall together before the goodness of God and speak truth in love and trust. Because when you say something to God, you're not really telling him something he doesn't know. I mean, talk about being able to lay out your most dark secret to somebody who already knows. To be brutally honest before a holy God that life is crushing you and you can't take it anymore. He already knows. Let's be like Mary, my friends, and fall together before Jesus and speak truth, knowing that he already knows it. He's going to love us and that we can trust him because he is good. He is faithful and he is mighty in strength. So let's break it down. In spiritual warfare. In spiritual warfare, my friends, honesty, humility, love, trust, worship, and our raw inner struggle are godliness and are used by God for our spiritual and personal growth and for helping others. Because it's a work of God to grow us and to help others, the enemy wants us to move away from God's presence and God's work. He wants to lure us away from that. You're too wounded to worship. You're too wounded to help. You don't have your stuff together. How can you give encouragement and love and honesty to your friend who is going through it? The enemy wants to lure us away from God's presence and lure us away from God's work. And we need to resist that temptation and reject that fear and that unworthiness, because you are made in the image of God, and God is working in your life in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Which brings me to, our walk with Christ. My friends, we need to fall at Jesus' feet with our whole heart, worship and wounds together. We need to express our faith by speaking aloud our real pain and struggle to our real Savior. So let's worship, but let's confess what we're really dealing with and see how He works in the midst of it. When Mary did it, you saw how Jesus responded. Jesus responded by weeping with her. And sometimes that's all that we need. We can't put a mask on before God because He sees through it. And yet, how many of us regularly wear layers of masks between us and our holy God and then make it worse instead of receiving the help from His presence when we worship with our wounds bearing? It's a beautiful thing. And of course, that bleeds into our relationships, my friends. We need to allow room for people to speak their grief to us, to ask you and I the hard questions, even their frustrations. We need to make it okay in our relationships with people for people to say, I need you to leave me alone. For people to say, I appreciate that, but I think you're part of the problem. For people to say, I know you asked how I'm doing and you want me to say everything is good, but here is this trainload of cars of what I am dealing with. Oh, by the way, I've been dealing with this for 1.5 years, and you're the first person I'm telling about. We need to leave room in that relationship for that to be okay. Jesus did not rebuke Mary for her sorrow. He didn't say, shame, shame, shame. Where's your faith? For God causes all things to work together for, God's will. He wept with her. He received it. And we need to be like that in our relationships, my friends. We need to do that to others, sharing our pain, and we need to receive their pain as well. And this is a beautiful thing in marriage. We need to make our marriages a safe place where our spouse can fall apart and be heard, and you will not tell people about it. You won't correct them or shame them. You'll value their vulnerability. We need to have our most intimate relationships with people be marked by truth lived and truth spoken. Truth articulated, wrapped up in love and compassion and support, my friends. That's a marriage you want to be in until death do you part. What will you do? When grief, sorrow, pain comes, will you stay? Will you follow? Will you fall before the feet of Jesus? We need to be like Jesus. We need to be like mourners, and we need to be like Mary. What are you going to do?